for your test, for the pre-trip inspection, you have got to point to or touch every item that you're inspecting and describe the physical characteristics you're looking for that item. If you don't do that, you can't get credit. Your instructions will be to start at the front of the bus, do both sides of the engine compartment, and then proceed down the driver's side of the bus. So we're going to begin at the front of the bus, and I'll check my clearance lights at the top, make sure they're intact and securely mounted. My passenger lights, amber and red, again, they must be intact, securely mounted, no cracks. The windshield should not have any cracks, scratches, or other damage that could distort your vision. Windshield wipers should be attached and show no signs of the rubber cracking or coming apart. Our headlights and our turn signals on the front should be intact, securely mounted, no cracks, no breaks. And our mirrors are in place. Our passenger mirrors are crossed over, securely mounted, no cracks, no breaks, as well as our regular mirrors, no cracks, no breaks, securely mounted. And we'll open the hood to prepare for checking under the hood. Taking that mirror while we're here. Under the hood, there are 8 items that are to be inspected. Of those 8 items, start up here with the coolant level. Coolant must be above the fill line. If you have a see-through container, it was an older bus with the metal container, you must be able to see the fluid level in the sight glass. All the hoses should be checked to make sure there's no cracks, no leaks. The cap should be on tightly. The alternator, check it to make sure it's securely mounted. The cables on the back side are secure, no signs of arcing or corrosion. The fan belt should be secure, properly tensioned, which means no more than 3/4 of an inch of deflection. No cracks or fraying on the belt. I can look back behind the pulleys in the area where the water pump is, and we look for any signs of leaks or damage in the water pump area. And then we can go around to the other side of the engine. At least on this model bus, those 3 items are what we see there. On this side, power steering fluid. Make sure it's above the cold fill line. Again, if you can see it through the container, older containers, you might have to pull the cap off for the dipstick. All the hoses coming from it should also show no signs of cracking or leaking. The oil dipstick, you pull it out, make sure the oil level is above the add mark. And this is shown right at the full mark. On the actual test, if you do not want to pull the stick out because you can get oily, you can still get credit if you at least describe the steps. You normally pull it out, wipe it, and then try it again. The air compressor on this bus is down right behind this oil filter back in here. This is a gear-driven air compressor. So you look in that area to make sure all the hoses are attached properly, no signs of damage to it, no leaks that you can tell at this point. Steering gearbox, securely mounted to the frame, no signs of leakage or damage. All the hoses are attached securely and properly. And the steering linkage. Upper linkage goes from here to the steering wheel. Lower linkage, pitman arm and drag link here should be attached. No signs of excessive wear. All the pins and nuts in place. And then all the other hoses throughout the engine compartment are just looked at as an overall view to make sure there are no leaks, no cracks. All of them appear to be in proper shape. And that's the engine compartment. Then we can move to our suspension system. Suspension system, the springs, no cracks. They are properly aligned on each other and no breaks. No more than 25% of your springs can be missing. The U-bolts, which attach the springs to the axle, no cracks, no breaks, they are properly tightened. The mounts, front mount here, rear mount back under the back, should be in place with no cracks, no breaks, no loose or missing bolts. The shock absorber, properly fastened, no damage, and no leaks on it. If you also have an airbag, it would be beside the shock absorber, and it would be checked for cracks, damage to the rubber, or any leaks. If you do not have the airbag, you can skip it. On a school bus, you'll often have an airbag on the rear axle, but not the front. Then we'll look for the brakes. The brake hose, properly attached to both sides, no cracks, no obvious leaks. The brake chamber, no damage, it is secured properly, no obvious leaks on it. The push rod and slack adjuster assembly, no cracks, no damage, the pins in place to connect the two. And then looking over the wheel, inside the wheel here, we see the brake drum and the drum linings. They should not be worn thin, no cracks, no liquid contamination inside the brake drum. That'll be the brake system. Then we move to the tire. 3 characteristics we check for the tire. Tread depth. The depth of the major grooves must be a minimum of 4/32 of an inch. These are getting close. So make sure you got tread depth. Then look overall appearance. You look for uneven wear, flat spotting, or any other damage to the tire or the side. Make sure there's nothing that's going to cause a problem with the tire. And then the air pressure. Air pressure is checked with an air pressure gauge on the valve stem. School buses should run 80 to 100 pounds of air. The rim. Check the rim for any cracks, breaks, major damage to the edge of it. Do not allow any wheels that have a aftermarket weld. Look like somebody's tried to repair it. It's illegal to run those. All your lug nuts should be in place. No cracks, properly tight. No rust trails like it's had water in there at all. The hub oil seal in place, bolted securely, no leaks of the oil. Then we can start proceeding down the side of the bus. We check the bus to make sure no breaks or damage to the windows. Clearance lights at the top of the bus. Amber in front of the rear axle, red behind the rear axle. They're intact, proper colors, seem to be mounted securely. Side mounted turn signal, also intact, mounted securely. Your school stop sign. So clearly stay stop on both sides. Lenses, top and bottom, are free of any cracks and securely mounted. I feel tension when I pull it out, but it's not binding. It's relatively smooth. I don't see any damage to the airbag inside. And when I release it, it does naturally pull back in place. The access panels on the side are securely closed. Reflectors on the side are attached, not broken or missing. Before you get to the rear axle, we would look under the bus. 3 things are in the middle of the bus. The frame, the ladder-like structure, must be free of any cracks, breaks, bends, or non-factory holes. Down the middle of the bus, the drive shaft from the transmission to the rear axle must be intact. No excessive wear to the universal joints, and the safety hangers are in place to catch it if it should happen to break loose. On the other side of the drive shaft is the exhaust system. Runs from the engine all the way to the rear bumper. We want to make sure that is properly mounted. No signs of a leak, which would show by a buildup of soot around the leak. Then we look toward the rear axle. We have suspension system. Our springs, again, they should not have any cracks, properly aligned with each other, no more than 25% missing. Our U-bolts, look under the axle, we can see them on the other side. The 4 nuts down there, they should be tight, show no signs of slippage. Our mounts, no cracks, no breaks, no loose or missing bolts. And the shock absorber and the airbag is better seen behind the axle, so we'll look back there. We can also look right here at our brake chamber. Larger in the back, but we'll still judge it to make sure it's not damaged, seems secure. The hoses that come to it, 2 hoses on each side to the rear. They're going up into the frame. Make sure they're not showing cracks. They are connected properly. No signs of damage or leaks. The slack adjuster and push rod, we look across the bus, we can see it behind the brake chamber. They are attached, the pins in place. And if you look behind it best you can, inside the wheel, see the brake drum and the lining. Make sure the brake drum and the lining is not worn too thin, has no cracks, and there's no liquid contamination. Look at our tires. Rear tires have to be 2 32 inch minimum of tread depth. They must be also free of any uneven wear, flat spotting, or damage to the rubber. We use bud spacing on our tires, which puts a gap between the tires. Make sure it's clear, nothing stuck in there that would cause the tires to rub. Air pressure in rear tires, 80 to 100 pounds, as checked with an air pressure gauge on the valve stems. The rim, again, check no cracks, no breaks, no damage to the outer edge, no aftermarket welding. All the lug nuts intact, no cracks, no breaks, they are all secure. No rust trails to indicate they were loose. The axle seal is in place, bolted down with no leaks. And there again is our valve stem for the outer tire, valve stem for the other tire through there. Make sure that your mud flaps are secured. If they're attached at all, you don't want them flying loose later. Behind the wheel, we will look and see the shock absorbers securely attached, no damage, no leaks. And right behind them are our airbags. No cracks, no leaks. And the mounts for those are also intact, properly secured. Slightly to the right here, we can see our fuel tank. Fuel tank is mounted in the middle. No damage, no cracks, no leaks. And we see the last part of our exhaust system as well. Still secured, no signs of exhaust leaks. Still checking our reflectors and clearance lights on the rear. As we come around to the back side, clearance lights at the top. They should be intact, securely mounted. They see red on their back. The passenger lights, amber and red, should be intact, properly secured. All the windows in the back, no cracks, no breaks, nothing to obscure your vision. Turn signals, tail lights, brake lights, tag lights, and all intact, securely mounted. Once we get inside, we'll make sure they work. The reflective tape on the rear bumper should be present and need to be in proper condition. This looks a little bit worn, but it's still got some reflective properties to it. Exhaust system should have no obstruction. The door should be checked. It should open all the way. Make sure it will catch when it opens so it doesn't fly back and hit you in the face. Make sure it's closed. Come around this side, and for the test, anything that is a duplicate over here that you already checked, you do not have to repeat. Just check what is unique to this side. First thing that's unique is our fuel. We want to check the fuel cap. Make sure the cap is in place. It's tight with no leaks around it. We've already checked the fuel tank under there. Check the tires, we did the other side. We have a storage unit. If you have that, you don't want any surprises in there, and make sure that the door is securely closed. This is unique from the other side, but it is not yet required for the test. That's the DEF. Newer buses will have that. When you get to the door, all the glass needs to be checked to make sure it's not cracked, broken, nothing to obscure your vision. Make sure the hinges work properly. It seems to work correctly there. The steps need to be free of any tripping hazards. The guardrails or handrails securely in place. They'll help you if you start to fall. Boarding lights in place, not cracked, broken, or missing. The signage should be legible. And I will now close the hood, then we'll step on the bus. As we step on the bus, you should always maintain 3 points of contact for safety. Handrail and your feet. Come up safely. Once you get to the top of the steps, look for the door switch. Make sure it's in the normal or operating position. We'll overlook that, right? Check your safety equipment. You have a fire extinguisher, probably secured, properly charged, the needle is in the green. Your reflective triangles, this box should have 3 reflective triangles in it. I need some work. First aid kit. This is a see-through first aid kit, so you can plainly tell it's got the supplies in it. This was sealed, so it hasn't even been opened yet. Body fluid cleanup kit. Again, if it's a see-through, you can see the stuff in it. Some of the older ones you can't, you'd have to open them up. Make sure the door is latched secure when you close it. This point, we would want to take the key out. We're going to turn the electrical on. We're not cranking the bus yet. Get the right key. This is Bluebird. We'll just turn it to the on position. And give it a moment. It'll do its self checks. And once it settles down, do we hear any alarm? There is no alarms on it right now, which alerts me air pressure is already built up. Wasn't parked properly. But with the key on, we can proceed to check the interior of the bus. We're going to go down the aisle, checking all the seats, make sure they're secure. We don't need that on the radio. On the video, brother. Check the seats, make sure they're secure all the way down. Also visually check to make sure there's no damage, nothing left on the bus that should not be here. So check every seat. Notice this seat has some damage there. If we had not already reported it, we'd make sure that was reported. And when we get to the back, we're going to open the door again. This time we're checking for the emergency exit alarm. Alarm comes on when the door is open. That lets us know the alarm will alert me if I'm in the driver's seat and the door is open. And I can stop the bus, pick Johnny up, and take care of him, throw him out. On the way back to the front, I'm checking that the bottom of the seats is secured into the frame. And our other emergency exits, our windows, and our roof exit. Make sure those alarms will come on. Somebody's apples over there. For those who think some of this can be overlooked, if you don't check it, you cannot guarantee it'll work. When you get to the front of the bus, everything behind us now has been verified. Then we can check the seat. Make sure it's secured. Make sure the seat belt does not show signs of fraying. And we can get in the seat. You should get the seat belt on for safety. Now we are able to do a safe start. That means we're going to start it while maintaining control. Check our brake button, make sure it's out, make sure it's in neutral. I'm going to put my foot on the brake and crank the bus. As soon as the bus is idling, I can remove my foot from the brake. I check my gauges. Oil pressure must immediately come up above 20 psi. Right now it's about 30. It will normally run somewhere around 50, but it's high enough to go with. Your temperature, you do not want it hot up in the upper part of the gauge. If it's on the low end, just keep an eye on it as it does warm up. And the fuel gauge should not be waving at you, but you want to make sure you have enough fuel for your trip. In this digital readout here, we can see our voltage. That tells you if you're charging your batteries. It should be between 12 and 14.5 volts. And we're at 13.7, 13.8, so we are charging. This also shows you the transmission temperature. It should not be above about 270, so we're okay there. This one also shows the level of DEF. Don't let that run out, or it can retard your engine. Air pressure, primary and secondary. You want to air it up till it's at 120. Must be above 90, but 120 is max. We are fully aired up. No alarms are going off. So at this point, I can shut the engine off. Turn the key back to the on position. And I can check my noise-making switches. And I normally start the far left and work to the right. That way I don't miss anything. So I got my rear heaters, front heaters. Make sure they all work. This one is definitely important for the driver. Make sure your heater and defroster will work. You set it to the driver, to the defroster setting here. And when you turn these on for the test, don't just listen for it. Make sure you feel air up on the windshield. If there's no air coming there, it's not a defroster. These are air conditioning, which are not required for the test. So we can forget those right now. Look back over here. This is another defroster fan, normally mounted at the window. It is a defroster fan. It'll help get more air on the door if you need to keep it clear, if you got a lot of condensation. You have your control switch for your passenger lights. A master switch must be on for any of your passenger lights to function. If it's off, they will not work. This is a switch to actually start your passenger lights. So we'll get to those in just a second. Interior lights. Make sure that the lights inside the bus work. That can be handy not only to see if it's dark, but also used to alert your passengers that you need them to get quiet, like if you're approaching a railroad crossing. Headlight switch. We have daytime run lights on our buses, but if you don't turn that switch on when you're operating the bus, some of the other lights might not work. So make sure that is on when you're operating the bus. Windshield wipers, make sure they work, as well as the windshield washer. So hold it in long enough to get the windshield washer. That has to be checked too. So you check your noise making ideas. Now let's come back for all of our light check. Engine is off, so it will be okay for me to get out of the seat and walk around. I'm going to turn on the headlights. If you can use your mirrors, if it's dark enough to tell if your high beams work, during the day you may not be able to. But also check your indicator on the dash for your high beam. It's on, it's off, back on. So, and then turn signals, left turn signal on the dash. In the mirror, if you can see it. Sometimes the mirror brackets impede that. The right hand turn signal again on the dash and in the mirrors if you can. You will need some assistance on checking those in the back of the bus, or make several trips to the back yourself. I'm going to reach under here and turn on my hazard lights. Both of these lights on the dash are now working. So my headlights are on, my hazard lights are on. I'm coming back over here for my passenger lights. Turn on my amber lights. Look in my mirrors, and my amber lights are actually flashing on top. And the warning light on the side over here is on. So now I'm going to open my warning light here. Now I'm going to open the door, which should also turn on my red lights. Open the door, my stop sign came out, and see that in the mirror? My red lights are on and my mirrors out front, and the warning light changed by my switch. Engine not running, so now I can go out and walk around the bus looking at my lights. When the door opened, the boarding light came on, as well as my dome lights, so the students do not walk in or out in the dark. As we come out, we look at my turn signal and my marker light here, and my headlight. See, they're working. My walk arm did come out as it should with the door open. Back at the bus, my clearance lights are on at the top. My red passenger lights are on. Around this side, headlights, turn signal and marker light working here. Clearance lights down the side of the bus are on. My stop sign is out and flashing. Hazard light on the side is flashing. Come all the way to the back of the bus. My clearance lights are on. My red passenger lights are working. My hazard lights are working. Tail lights are working properly. On this side, I can see my clearance lights at the top of the bus are on, and my hazard light by the door is on. I have not verified turn signals, brake lights on the back. You need help for that. On the test, you can get back in the bus to check those. I will remain in the back of the bus to help verify your turn signals and your brake lights work correctly. You just have to call out which one that you're going to check. Then we can get back in the bus. Once we finish the light check, We get back in the bus, return to the seat. I'm going to close the door. Verify when the doors close, the passenger light system shuts down. Red lights are off, stop sign is in, walk arm is in. I'm going to then turn off my hazard lights and my running lights just to save on power for a moment. I look back at my air gauges. They are still fully aired up. Didn't lose much air. That allows me to get ready to check my brake system. The LAB test must be completed, all 3 steps of it, to pass the test. If you miss any one step of it, it's an automatic failure. It is also required when you renew. First step is the leak check. You need some way of checking the time. So I want to bring up my stopwatch. I'm going to press the brake pedal down and hold it. Press down. My needles will drop on my gauges because I'm using some air. When they stop moving, I will start my timer. And I'm going to check the time for 1 minute while watching the gauges. Open my window as well. I'm listening for an air leak. I'm watching my gauges. We should not lose more than 3 psi during this minute's time. So I've got my stopwatch going to watch the time. I'm watching my needles and I'm listening. If you do not have a way to check your time, think now about bringing a watch or your phone. Or I've heard one person said he counted to 60. But you need to go a full minute. That's the federal standard. Okay, we're coming up on a minute. And after the minute is finished, I look at my gauge. They did not drop more than 3 psi. I now move to begin checking my low pressure alarm. To do that, I pump the brakes. Each time you pump it, you lower the air pressure. So I'm going to do that until the alarm comes on. Alarm came on. I got front and rear alarms on. It means my air pressure is dropped. I look at the gauges, it's around 60 psi, right where it should be. At this point, I'm going to press the brake pedal in. That releases the brakes. Now I'm going to pump the brakes until that button pops out. The bus might move, so be aware of that. Don't let it get out of control. If you're on a hill, it's more of a movement. The button popped out. That means my emergency brake was just applied. Look at my air pressure. Air pressure should be between 20 and 30 psi. We're just below 25. So it's right in the area it needs to be. That tells me my air brake system works correctly. So now, put my seatbelt back on. I have to crank the bus one more time, do a safe start, check the transmission, check the brake. We gotta let it air up again. Once we get aired up, we then check brake adjustment. Make sure the brakes, the system works correctly. Now we'll make sure that the brakes are adjusted to hold the bus properly. Don't get impatient. It really doesn't take as long as it seems sometimes to air up. I've told people a lot of times during this time, they can check last minute adjustments to their route. make sure that they're comfortable so that once we check the brakes, then we're ready to drive. Make sure all your mirrors are adjusted properly. And don't get fixated on this particular dash or this particular instrument cluster, because every bus will be a little bit different, especially if you change brands. So if you get in a bus you're not familiar with, take a moment to learn where things are. Our alarms went off. That tells us we're at least at 60 psi, but we need to be at least 90 before we do anything else. So we'll let it air up a little bit more. We're almost at 90. Once we're at 90 to 120 is our operating range, we can check our parking brake. Make sure the brake is on. The button is out, so the parking brake is applied. I'm going to shift into drive and try to move the bus. You can feel the bus trying to move, but the brakes are holding. That's what we wanted to verify. So the parking brakes are adjusted correctly. So now I'm going to release the brakes and actually move the bus slowly, but a short distance, to make sure that the service brake works. Make sure if you're doing this, no one is standing on the bus. You don't want to throw them in the floor. Also, for this test, you want very little, if any, pressure on the steering wheel, because when I apply the brakes, I want to know if it pulls to one side or not. Hit the brakes, make sure the steering wheel does not pull. You may want to do it more than once. If the steering wheel does not move to one side or another, then it brakes evenly. Then I'm going to shift to reverse. I'm listening for the backup alarm in the back is on. Make sure my horn works. Check my mirrors. I can back it into place. Again, check sure the brakes are working. And when that is finished, we have completed our pre-trip inspection. Now the big question, is the bus safe to drive? And I think it is.